Hey, good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. A lot of it going on. Coming up, Mike Davis joins us from the Article 3 Project. We're going to chat with him about Judge Eileen Cannon, a federal judge, declaring today that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, acted unconstitutionally in appointing Jack Smith to be special counsel to go after Donald Trump. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Our media are out of control, completely out of control. Over the weekend, in the wake of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, a number of headlines coming out from all sorts of news outlets that really downplayed the horror that we had all witnessed on our television screens. Everyone from USA Today headline, Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises startles former president, crowd. NBC News, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after popping noises heard at his Pennsylvania rally. CNN, Trump injured in incident at rally. Way to tell us nothing. And then Los Angeles Times, Trump whisked off stage in Pennsylvania after loud noises rang through the crowd. For more on this and so much more, let's bring in Brent Bozell now. He's the founder and president of the Media Research Center and chairman of For America, and he joins us live from Milwaukee. Hello, Brent.
Hi, Vince. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm grateful that you're on with us. I know right now is a big moment. J.D. Vance is about to accept the nomination here to be President Trump's running mate, but I do need to talk to you about the press. What did you make of their behavior this weekend in the wake of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump?
Well, look, there's not a person in America following this election who didn't believe it was not within the realm of possibilities that someone would try to kill Donald Trump. And that's not hyperbole. Everyone knew that was a real possibility. And yet, throughout this entire campaign, the vitriol coming from the left about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy is telling. I don't know if you remember this, Vince. And maybe a lot in people in your audience won't, and this dates me a little bit. But go back to 1995 when you had the Oklahoma City bombing and Timothy McVeigh committed that act of terror.
Yeah.
You had left and right. You had, whether it was Brian Gumbel on NBC, CBS, The Washington Post, ABC, the LA Times, all of them blamed conservative talk radio for this. And they talked about the rhetoric coming from the right. There was one Time magazine called Conservative Talk Radio the unindicted co-conspirator in the blast. So the left had no problem whatsoever indicting conservative talk radio for an act of terrorism. Fine. You want to do that, then I'm repaying the favor, and I'm saying that the left-wing media are the unindicted co-conspirators in the attempt on the life of Donald Trump.
You know, in the wake of the attempt on President Trump's life, though, the media, of course, adopted the same posture, which is to blame the right. In fact, here's ABC's Martha Raddatz and George Stephanopoulos immediately attacking the right after President Trump was shot. Take a listen.
Also, George, we have to point out, no matter who the shooter, what the shooter's motives were, no matter who the shooter is, you are going to hear conspiracy theories going forward.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Now, let me just add the obvious here, which is she's spreading hoaxes. The bloodbath line was about what would happen to the auto industry. It was an economic matter. And yet there she is on national television saying, you know, the real problem here, Brent Bozell, is conservatives, people who might vote for Trump.
Yeah, 2 points. One, when she talks about the bloodbath. That's just a blatant lie on her part. She knows. She knows full well that was inaccurate, and she said it anyway. But look, what is she saying? What's Stephanopoulos saying? What they're saying is Donald Trump had it coming to him. That's exactly what they're saying. It's his fault. He had it coming to him because of his rhetoric. I think it's offensive that I'm sorry. I found it offensive to have the President of the United States go on national television and play a game of moral relevancy when it came to violence in America, and talking about both sides needing to tone it down. I'm sorry. Conservatives don't go in that direction. They don't go in the direction that the left has been going. They don't talk about Joe Biden being a threat to democracy, and he's got to be stopped, and he's a dictator, and he's Adolf Hitler. You know, George Scarborough had no problem saying that over and over and over again, and finally somebody acted on it. So please, Mr. President, no lectures from you to me.
Well, also, you know, in President Biden's Oval Office address last night, he didn't mention any of the many attacks on conservatives that have taken place outside of, obviously, the one that we saw this weekend on President Trump. But there was no in-depth assessment of, oh, look at the attack on that baseball field against all of those Republican members of Congress. Look at the attempted assassination of Brett Kavanaugh, egged on by the left. That attacker goes and thinks that he can actually assassinate a Supreme Court justice in order to short-circuit a pending Supreme Court decision. No conversation of any meaning about the number of times that left-wing extremists have attempted to kill American Republicans.
No, and you see roving bands of Antifa in cities all over America. You saw Black Lives Matter causing $1.2 billion worth of damage in the longest, most violent riots in the history of this nation. They've never held to account for what they did. Never have been held. Pro-Hamas demonstrators. We talk about J6 all day long, but what about the pro-Hamas demonstrators? What about Code Pink going into the Congress and disrupting Congress?
Yes.
You never hear the left held to account for their actions, but somehow when Donald Trump it comes within a fraction of an inch of having his head blown off, it's his fault, yes, according to Martha Raddatz.
It's just disgraceful, as usual. You do such a good job documenting all of it. Brent Bozell, again, from Milwaukee. I know there's a busy convention going on. We'll let you get back to it. Thank you for your time today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. He's, again, Brent Bozell with the Media Research Center and For America. On that point, though, the left's rhetoric around all of this, there's just so much I can share with you. For instance, Joe Biden's blood red speech in Philadelphia, where, remember, he put 2 United States Marines behind him to try and pretend like the Marine Corps supported this message. Just awful, as he attacks President Trump and his supporters as a threat to our republic.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans quote a clear and present danger to our democracy.
Yeah, and by the way, again, in case you were wondering, is the left going to back off on its threat to democracy language? That's not happening. Today, the Biden campaign immediately assessing that the now Trump-Vance ticket is the opposite of democracy. In order to save democracy, you got to vote for Biden. Otherwise, democracy is over. Also, he's not alone. Congressman Dan Goldman, the Levi Strauss heir, was on MSNBC recently, and this is what he had to say about Trump.
That man cannot see public office again. He is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
He has to be eliminated. Michael Beschloss is a left-wing presidential historian. He suggested if Trump comes back into office, your children are going to be killed.
What was at stake tonight and this week was the fact whether we will be a democracy in the future, whether our children will be arrested and conceivably killed. We're on the edge of a brutal authoritarian system, and it could be a week away.
That's the kind of language you get from the left. Maxine Waters has had this to say about Donald Trump.
With this kind of inspiration, I will go and take Trump out tonight.
There's a cable news pundit called Rick Wilson. He was a little more frank in his assessment of what should happen to Trump. This is what he said the donor class should do.
The donor class can't just sit back on the sidelines and say, oh, well, don't worry, this will all work itself out. They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
And that's a fact. They need to put a bullet in him. Oh, I was talking metaphorically. Really? Interesting. James Carville, the Ragin' Cajun, says that Biden needs someone to do his wet work. That would be murder. Wet work is a euphemism for murdering someone.
President Biden is not the best attack politician I've ever seen in my life, and I'll leave it at that. But there are a lot of people to do what I call, quote, the wet work, unquote. Yes, a CIA term. Take a guy out. But he doesn't need to do the wet work. People like me and other groups in the party need to do that. He's not very good at it.
Yeah, there's also this, another historian, Douglas Brinkley. These are all people who suck up to Biden, by the way, and Biden sucks up to them in the hopes that they're going to write great history books about him. Douglas Brinkley says, Trump, he's a big Hitler lover. He's a Mein Kampf guy.
He's been dabbling in Adolf Hitler his whole life, keeps Hitler's speeches at a bedside. Mein Kampf seems to be the book that's inspired Trump the most.
Yeah, he's not alone. David Muir at ABC, one of their top anchors, says, well, Trump's a lot like, the guy with the little mustache.
We turn now to the race for the White House, and former President Trump campaigning in New Hampshire, again using language echoing Hitler. Tonight, his Republican rivals have been forced to address this, the words being condemned as very dangerous, given how they were used in recent history.
Yeah, Morning Joe does the same move.
Outside of Hitler, I can't think of too many other leaders throughout history who have actually turned their mobs or turned their troops against their own government.
Yeah, and it goes on and on. I got a million examples of this. I got one Democrat senator saying that that Trump is worse than Hitler and Mussolini combined. He's even worse than them. How about this? What else do we have? Oh, we have Coringe. We have Coringe audio. Here's what Coringe has said about Donald Trump and his supporters.
The president thinks that there is an extremist threat to our democracy. The president has been clear as he can be on that particular piece when we talk about a democracy, when we talk about our freedoms. The way that he sees is the MAGA Republicans are the most energized part of the Republican Party. This is an extreme threat to our democracy, to our freedom, to our rights.
An extreme threat, as she says, to our democracy. Which is what she always says. It's insanity. Your calls in just a moment as our busy show barrels along. It's 5:20 now. Yeah, I'd be remiss if I went through this entire show without mentioning the death of Corey Comperatore. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I've heard a bunch of different pronunciations, but this man's a hero. He's a former fire chief there in Butler, Pennsylvania. He was attending the president's rally, and he was fatally shot by the assailant, the would-be assassin, Thomas Crooks. He saved his two daughters. He dove on top of them in the midst of the shooting, and he was gunned down. There is audio here from Pennsylvania. The governor there, Josh Shapiro, had this to say about the sacrifice that Corey made to protect his family, describing him well as a hero.
We lost a fellow Pennsylvanian last night, Corey Comperatore. I just spoke to Corey's wife and Corey's two daughters. Corey was a girl dad. Corey was a firefighter. Corey went to church every Sunday. Corey loved his community. And most especially, Corey loved his family. Corey was an avid supporter of the former president and was so excited to be there last night with him in the community. I asked Corey's wife if it would be okay for me to share that we spoke. She said yes. She also asked that I share with all of you that Corey died a hero, that Corey dove on his family to protect them last night at this rally. Corey was the very best of us. May his memory be a blessing. Last night was shocking for this community and for this Commonwealth, and I know for this country. Political disagreements can never, ever be addressed through violence. Disagreements are okay, but we need to use a peaceful political process to settle those differences.
A decent message from Shapiro. Meanwhile, it's not just the homicide, not just the death of Corey, but also there were several others who were critically wounded last night in this shooting. David Dutch is 57 years old from New Kensington, Pennsylvania. He is a Marine. He was once in the Corps, and he's been working at Siemens, according to the New York Times, for the last few decades, according to his sister. He was hospitalized. He's got damage to his liver and broken ribs. He's going to be getting a variety of surgeries, it sounds like. But that's the update on him. Meanwhile, there's a guy called James Copenhaver. He's 74 years old. He's from Moon Township, Pennsylvania, also injured. They say that records show that he was registered as a Democrat. That's according to the New York Times. I guess they looked into his political registration. I'm not sure why. He's married with at least one son and plays in a band, according to his friends. His friends don't have many details on his condition, but they, at least shared, but they said they were optimistic about his prognosis. Quote, Jim's a healthy 74-year-old, according to one of his buddies who spoke to the New York Times. Additionally, Dr. Ronnie Jackson was, who we had on our program Friday. We were talking about a completely different issue, which is Joe Biden's health and mental fitness and what's going on with the White House physician. Ronnie Jackson telling Fox News' Sean Hannity over the weekend, his nephew was also there, who was seated in the kind of, I guess, the friends and family section of the rally. He was grazed in the neck by one of the bullets, but is doing okay. A bullet crossed his neck, cut his neck, and he was bleeding from there. But, man, that's another close call out of that shooter's gun. He said, thankfully, his injury was not serious. He is doing well. He was treated by the providers in the medical tent. Chaos this weekend. Absolute chaos. And lots of news today. I've got the information. You've got Jack Smith, the special counsel, a federal judge ruling today that he was unconstitutionally appointed. You heard Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas say this. He wrote this in a big opinion just a few weeks ago. Now a federal judge saying the same thing. We're going to talk to Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project in just a moment about this important breaking news. A lot happening. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We've got our first clips coming out of Joe Biden's interview with Lester Holt on NBC. The interview apparently concluded already. It's going to air tonight. There's a lot of competition for eyeballs tonight. You've got Biden speaking to Lester Holt, and he was asked, have you done any soul searching about your own rhetoric that may be leading to political violence in the country? Here's Joe Biden's answer.
Have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Well, I don't think, look, how do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real?
Oh, he's doing it. He's doing it again. He's breathing life into the very toxic rhetoric that he was using in the first place, that is making people think that should Trump be elected, that our country will collapse into ruin.
Says things like he says. Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I've not engaged in that rhetoric.
What?
Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses.
Oh, my God.
Talking about how he's going to forgive all the...
Okay, so let me... is it possible for us to... Let's get the bloodbath rhetoric thing up. I'm going to see if I have this. I got to look real fast. I may or may not be able to provide this to you very quickly. But this whole bloodbath thing, if you go back in time, this was President Trump talking about what is happening to the auto industry, and then he would later use it to talk about the oh, here it is. Okay, so this is the out-of-context version of Trump that the left was running with.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole... That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
That's what the left ran with. They said it's going to be a total bloodbath, meaning Trump was advocating violence. He was not. Take a listen.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it. Went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line. And you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories.
What is he saying? What is he saying? He's talking about the economic consequences, a bloodbath, an economic bloodbath in the country. And, of course, the left lies. Biden just lied again. Who else lied about it this weekend? Martha Raddatz lied about it on ABC. Liars, all of them. And so here Biden repeating the lie. They go back to their old hoaxes. They don't even care when they're disproven. They just go back to them. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if in this same interview, Biden claims that Trump stole the 2016 election in league with Vladimir Putin. They don't care. They'll just keep repeating it. Here's more from NBC. From the interview this evening, they ask Biden about the fact that he said last week, what was the phrase? Bullseye. Politico, defiant Biden tells donors, we're done talking about the debate. He says in his conversation with the donors, I have one job, that's to beat Donald Trump. I'm absolutely certain I'm the best person to be able to do that. So we're done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye. Bullseye. NBC asks Biden about this.
You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was what I guess I was talking about.
Did you hear him there? He goes, I didn't say crosshairs. Lester Holt said bullseye, you dummy. He didn't say crosshairs.
The context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was what I guess I was talking about at the time was there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
What is? First of all, insofar as you think that this language is bad to use, why would bullseye be an improvement over crosshairs? Does that make any sense to you? Why would... I didn't say crosshairs. All I said was bullseye. What? What are you even talking about? And look, let's be honest. In a normal world where you didn't have the lunacy that the left is advancing on a daily basis, you could use phrases like, hey, we're targeting that guy for political advertising. It would be normal to use these words as metaphors for normal exchanges and nobody could walk away concluding, oh, he's really talking about violence. You know what I mean? Remember they attacked Sarah Palin for she had a district map. She was the districts they were targeting all across the country for flipping to Republicans. And one of those districts was in Arizona at the time. Congresswoman Gabby Giffords occupied that seat. Gabby Giffords was attacked by a lunatic. And then what did the left do? The left blamed Sarah Palin. The left said it was Palin's fault because they found some graphic that she had been associated with where they had all these, quote, targeted districts across the country. And they say, it's your fault. It's your fault. You targeted her. So therefore, and there's no evidence for that. There was no evidence whatsoever that this guy was inspired by Sarah Palin to attack Gabby Gifford. But these are the rules the left has created. You use phrases like this, target, bloodbath, even bloodbath, that's economic bloodbath. Biden saying, what does he say about Trump? He says he's the one using violent rhetoric. He used bloodbath. Okay, so what is bullseye then? What is bullseye then? If you say that you're putting Trump in a bullseye, what should we derive from that? What conclusion should we walk away with? Trump was just almost killed this weekend within fractions of an inch. And I can't emphasize that detail enough. Trump, by the grace of God, you know that he called out to his own people to put that chart on that screen. He got off teleprompter. He said he's like, I'm not doing the teleprompter. I just want to put this chart about immigration numbers up on the screen. Can we do this? He calls out. And so they put up the chart for him. And that's when he begins gesturing to the chart and turning his head to and fro, back from the audience, back to the chart. And as he looks towards the chart, those bullets start flying, and one goes through his right ear. Had his head not been turned, you know by now, that bullet would have gone through the back of his skull. And we'd be having a very different conversation today. Very different conversation. We wouldn't be watching as J.D. Vance is picked as his running mate, as the convention starts, as you see Trump 2024 out in front of the convention center in Milwaukee, as Trump himself is expected this evening at that event. That's not what we'd be dealing with right now. We'd be dealing with absolute chaos as a country. Absolute chaos. As a majority of Americans who support this guy to be president of the United States will be reacting in shock, horror, and outrage at the assassination of the leading contender for the president of the United States. Be very different. And so for Biden to get on TV this weekend and insist that he's like, oh, we need to bring the temperature down and unity and blah, blah, blah. Here he is immediately. He goes to Lester Holt on NBC and he says, not my problem, all Trump. Trump. And he goes, and he is. And he repeated it there. You heard him say he's a threat to democracy. What am I supposed to say? I have to say he's a threat to democracy. Should I be worried that I'm inciting people? Well, yes, especially because you're lying. What did that Congressman Jared Golden say? He just did an op-ed up in Maine like a week ago. This in the midst of all this tumult over whether or not Joe Biden would be thrown out of office by his own party. He says, guys, Trump is not a threat to democracy, despite what you might be hearing. In fact, he's the kind of guy who I think I can work with. And should Trump be elected this year, which seems very likely, my plan is to figure out ways that I could advance the needs of my district. That's what a Democrat in Congress said in an op-ed that he published under his own name. Now, that's pretty brave to do, considering most lefties don't allow that kind of conversation in public. You're not allowed to say that. Ezra Klein, a New York Times columnist, just admitted in a podcast last week that he keeps talking to all these members of Congress, Democrats, who admit to him they know Trump's not a threat to democracy. He's not an existential threat to this country. They know for a fact. Well, and there's all the evidence in the world for it. He was president before. So we kind of know what that looks like. And also, he never abused his power like we're seeing now with Joe Biden. The constant abuses, the brazen abuses of power, the using of the United States Department of Justice to try and imprison his political opponent ahead of the election, to hit him with countless charges. Which brings us to today's breaking news. We've got Eileen Cannon, this federal judge, one of the only people who's been involved in this whole saga who's tried to take a sober approach to it. Judge Eileen Cannon saying that Attorney General Merrick Garland's appointment of Jack Smith as special counsel is, are you ready, unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. On two bases, both the appointments and appropriations clauses. That this is crystal clear that this man is not in any way a representative of the federal government according to the United States Constitution. From the Daily Caller's coverage today, the judge overseeing former President Donald Trump's classified documents case granted his motion to dismiss the indictment Monday. Judge Eileen Cannon agreed to dismiss the case based on Trump's argument that special counsel Jack Smith's appointment is unlawful. She wrote that his appointment violates the Appointments Clause of the United States Constitution. She says both the appointments and appropriations challenges, as framed in the motion, raise the following threshold question. Is there a statute in the United States Code that authorizes the appointment of special counsel Smith to conduct this prosecution? After careful study of this seminal issue, the answer is no. Upon careful study of the foundational challenges raised in the motion, the court is convinced that special counsel Smith's prosecution of this action breaches two structural cornerstones of our constitutional scheme: the role of Congress in the appointment of constitutional officers and the role of Congress in authorizing expenditures by law. So she says not only does it violate one aspect of the Constitution, it violates two major aspects of the United States Constitution. This man was not nominated to this position. This man was not confirmed by the United States Senate. This man is occupying a position that a U.S. attorney would normally hold. He's got the power of a U.S. attorney or the Attorney General of the United States, and he wasn't confirmed to it. Wasn't nominated or confirmed to it. Additionally, where is he getting his money from? How can he be spending uncapped, endless sums of money without authorization from Congress? This whole special counsel thing was as an invention internally of the United States Department of Justice. Sorry, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. Judge Eileen Cannon declaring that today, throwing out the entire... Remember, this is Documents case. Do you remember how it all started? Or at least how it became really splashy? The Mar-a-Lago raid. That's this case. When the FBI goes smashing into Mar-a-Lago, raids the place, grabbing all of these documents, staging the crime scene, bringing with them cover sheets that they put on top of the classified material, by the way, which continues to be of dispute, considering Trump was president of the United States. If he decided to take it with him, he was de facto declassifying it. No object. No problem there whatsoever. So they come barreling in. They take photos of the staged, quote, crime scene, and then they release them to the public to try and convey to you that Donald Trump is reckless with the nation's secrets, that he stole them. Meanwhile, Biden was stealing classified documents for decades. A special counsel does a ridiculous examination of that. We haven't heard the audio of his conversation with Biden, which reflects very poorly on the man and his ability to think. Biden, who stole the documents, kept them next to his Corvette, among many other places, in Delaware, in his garage, not a secure place at all, in the vicinity of Hunter Biden's access on a routine basis. And they say no charges for him because he's too senile to stand trial. No jury's going to find him guilty. And in Jack Smith's case, I'm left with a remainder question here, at least for now. Is Jack Smith guilty of impersonating a federal officer? If a federal judge has just concluded that this position is a fantasy, the position of special counsel, that it is a complete invention and it is completely unconstitutional, has Jack Smith been impersonating a federal officer of the United States? Because if you can try and pop Trump on ticky-tack crimes, right? Oh, he mishandled this document. Oh, he didn't give it back to the archives appropriately. Oh, he misclassified a legal payment as a legal payment. Well, then why can't Jack Smith be charged with impersonating a federal officer? I'd love to know the answer. I'd love to know the answer. Obviously, Merrick Garland's not going to pursue it. Merrick Garland's the guy who put him into place in the first place. And Merrick Garland, if you're looking for more excuses for impeaching Merrick Garland, so long as we're handing those out, well, you just got one. A federal judge just declared that his behavior has been blatantly unconstitutional. You invented a prosecutor position that does not exist under the U.S. Constitution. It does not exist under the law. The United States Senate has not confirmed this person. No president nominated this person. You have an uncapped budget that wasn't authorized by Congress. Everything about this is unconstitutional. And God bless Clarence Thomas for having the courage and the clarity of thought to declare this in one of his recent concurring opinions. He released his own opinion that included this detail. This whole scheme looks pretty unconstitutional to me, said Justice Thomas. Now another federal judge agrees. All right, hold on. It's 5:52 now.
Hello, Vince. Thank you for taking my call. I know you're busy.
Thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So, look at what they did. They started with the Stormy Daniels and all the civil suits trying to bankrupt Trump. Then they moved on to the criminal, the impeachments, and thank God for Judge Cannon. But anyway, now this is their last resort to try to assassinate him. And my fear is this. I do not believe, and I think we all know this right now. We all know it in our hearts. This ain't going to be the last viable one. They're putting some people on him. This is really bad. So right now, I feel like we need to look at convention of state options.
In order to,
because
I'm with you, Greg. I like the convention of states. I love the convention of states. That needs to happen, and the goal of that is to strip away power from an increasingly tyrannical federal government. No question about that. A lot more ahead. Hey, we've got live coverage. Starts tonight at 9 here on WMAL. The great one, Mark Levin, will carry you up to that next.